Welcome to Bedside Manner, a show where I talk about different problems in life, diagnose it, and treat the problems at hand. Today's problem is, what is the matter with Taiwan and English? How can we solve it? So let's start with a story, I suppose. Imagine you're a foreigner wandering around in the streets of Taiwan, and maybe you're on a scooter or maybe you're on foot, doesn't matter really. And naturally, with the streets of Taiwan being so complicated, you'll get lost. No amount of Google Map can save you at this point. Then you start to ask some strangers at the road. Maybe you ask them, "Oh, I want to go to the 101. How can I get there?" Then the people may reply to you with something like this. Oh, 2 streets left here. And then 1 more street, go right. You will see the 101. Like something like this. I mean, you can go there and it's fine, I suppose. If you're just asking for direction, you're not really trying to have a deep conversation with them. Sometimes simple is better, right? But it's not very good and easy to understand what the Taiwanese people are getting at from what they are talking. So it's already not a good look, but imagine another scenario where you are at some places and trying to start a conversation with someone. Like imagine you're at a bar and trying to start a conversation with another people. Maybe you just want to have a talk, whatever. Then you go there, you find them, you try to ask, "Hey, good day, mate. How's it going?" Like, sorry for the British accent. And then they may reply to you, "Oh, good. Like a very stereotypical Asian accent and a very stereotypical Asian response where no one knows English. They reply to you with very simple terms, and I mean, it works, but it's not effective. So as a foreigner, you may be very confused at what you are seeing and hearing. You may think to yourself, what is the matter with Taiwan and English? How did we get here? So let's talk about how did we get here and what is the problem with Taiwan and English. Let's first define my own point of view. The first gripe I have with Taiwan and English is they can only read English but not speak it out. Like for example, you and your groupmate are doing a project. When you see something very useful but it's only in English, then you send it to the group chat that you have, and then you tell them, "I found this article to be very useful. Can you help me do a summary of it and present it to the class?" But then, yeah, they can read it, but when you look at the summary that they did, it's just a mess, you know? It's so bad that you can't even look at it. Like, what happened? I think even now it's gotten worse. It has gotten worse by AI, because AI can help them translate the whole article without them using their minds to think about anything. They don't even need to read English for them to understand the whole paragraph. So naturally, when they give out the summary in English, it's just a whole lot of nothingness where they copy what the AI has said, or they try to do it themselves. But the results are they just copy and paste the whole article with a bunch of connecting words in it. So I don't think that is a good practice to do something like this. And the teachers obviously won't be impressed by the work that this said person, this said group member has done. So I think this is the first problem to the English problem in Taiwan. And then secondly, Taiwanese people, they doesn't need to speak English. Taiwanese people expect foreigners to learn Chinese before they even get to Taiwan. And when they talk to the guy, they use Chinese, like straight from the airport. And it's not a good look, man. Not a good look. Now, how do you expect someone just landed without knowing any English, especially when you're looking Asian, and then you tell them, 护照, 护照. I'm like, the foreigners don't know Chinese at all. So why are you telling them something they need to do in Chinese? It doesn't work like that, you know? Or when you go to some places to eat, especially, the bosses, they don't know English and they tell them like weird stuff. Like if a Muslim is asking, is there pork in this meal? They will say, oh, there's meat in this meal. Like seriously, I have this conversation even in Chinese. I don't know what happened to Taiwan, you know. They never want to learn English and never need to speak English. Because a lot of foreigners, when they come to Taiwan, they learn Chinese before they even got here and get even better when they got here. Actually start to learn Chinese. But I don't know, I just think that it's weird that a foreigner is expected to learn your language rather than using an international language to communicate with other people. Like, they may be wrong and then they cannot get the correct messages out by communicating with Chinese, but you still expected them to use Chinese very fluently to talk something. I'm like, it's not how that works. Something can't be translated that easily, especially when you're not a master in both languages. So that's the second problem that I have with Taiwan and English. And then the third point is they only know the words but not sentence structure nor how a sentence is formed. Why is it a problem? You may think to yourself, oh, I know a lot of words and I know the meaning of it, so I can just type it out without a care in the world in grammar or something, and people can still know what I'm talking. Like, yeah, it is, but in the same way, we don't. Even in Chinese, if your grammar is so weird, people can't understand you and communicate with you. So why do you think in English that can be accepted? It isn't. And it leads to a lot of weird shenanigans happening where students or people in the street using English, but it's so bad that people can't understand them, but the words they are using is completely correct and flawless. Like, for example, they are still teaching in lights off to use in a business email or formal writing, but people don't use it in foreign countries anymore because it's too old. It's not something that foreigners will even use or know about, so why do you use it? It's just bad. Not only they don't know how to form a sentence or the sentence structures. Sometimes they use the words so weirdly that no one can understand. Like they will go to dictionary.com or some weird stuff, and they will use the least common expression of the set words. Then they will think that I can use it that way, but obviously you can't. It's like speaking medieval Chinese to someone right now. You can't understand any bits of it. So I think that's my view on this problem, the third problem that I have with Taiwan and English. And the final thing is, I think it's about critical period. Now you may ask or think to yourself, what is critical period? So what critical period is thought that humans have an easier time learning a second language before puberty. Like when you think about it, it's kind of natural, but some may disagree about it. I feel like this is very important because adults need to deal with life. As a young adult, I guess, we don't have time to learn a second languages. I don't have time to do Duolingo lesson even. Why do you think that I have time to learn a second language by going to class? I have work to do. I have tasks to do. The salary that I get isn't even enough for me to survive. How do you expect that I have the money and the time sink to learn a second language? It doesn't work like that. So to me, that is a very critical problem, no pun intended, that Taiwanese people doesn't have the critical period, or they don't use the critical period to learn English or a second, third languages. So that's my own point of view on this problem. Now, I think we can look at some documents and some researches to help support why do I think this way, and more things to supplement why do I think some things are in a certain way. So when we look at the junior high assessment exam, if you don't know what that is, it's basically a basic level exam to help you or to assess them to grade into different categories or are boards to go to high school. Like if you have high grade, you get to choose some good high school. If you have bad grade, then you just pay more money to get to a better school. So in there, about 30% of people failed in English, which is the highest amongst all the subjects that they test. And to me, I think it's very abysmal that they fail all of that. And how many people failed at a very basic level exam? Like how basic it is? I look at the questions and I said to myself, why are you even testing that? Like if you find someone from a more capable country and English isn't their mother tongue, for example, when you go to Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, they done this test in primary school. So why are you doing this in a secondary school exam? And when I look at the test, I think to myself, I can easily get full marks out of this test. Why are people failing this? It shows the problems where the education system is so bad that people didn't put in the work, or they didn't have the ability, or both, to try to get even a pass on this assessment exam. And it's just I don't know how to put it, man. It's so bad. So let's talk about another thing, which is British Council survey that's done in 2020 to 2021, where in there is that 80%, nah, they didn't put it that way, but the message is 80% of 12th grade students are not a upper intermediate speaker. Now, what is a upper intermediate speaker? So basically, a upper intermediate speaker is someone who is fluent in English. Like seriously, someone who is fluent in English are a upper intermediate speaker. And 80% of 12th grade students are not. What the hell is that? If you're trying to be international, then why? Why are almost all of your students cannot speak English? What the hell? But I guess Taiwan isn't trying to be an international city. I mean, when the foreign companies need to deal with Taiwan, they just hire a translator to do it. Or the big international company like TSMC, they can read English because they are the elites. So why? Why are we having this big problem where a tourist coming into Taiwan, they can't even find someone in the streets to have a chat with or communicate in English? I don't know what happened, but if that's the truth, then I think Taiwan are in a very serious trouble now, where English is still the most used international languages and Taiwan doesn't even bother with. Which leads to my next point, where there is a general guidelines of the 12-year basic education curriculum, which is the newest, the 108 curriculum, where inside that it states that Taiwanese students started to have mandatory English courses in 3rd grade, which is a very, very slow start when you compare to more capable countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, whatever. Like Taiwan is not China in the educational sense that they don't even bother with learning English until like 5th grade, 6th grade. But the curriculum showed that Taiwan is like China in the sense that they don't care about English. What happened here? If you're trying to be more international and have more international students coming in, more foreign investments coming in, English is very important, but you are doing it too slow, too soon. Like, I don't know, it's just bad, man. And we can see that there are only 40 credits required for English in order for a student to graduate high school. Like, seriously, if you are learning a second language, 40 credits is basically nothing when it comes to learning a language. Like, we can use the 10,000 hour theory that has been used again and again and again in a lot of stuff, where it states that if you want to be good at something, you must put 10,000 hours into it. Then you can be a master at something. 40? Even when we factor in the worksheets, it's just not enough. It's so bad. It relies on students self-learning or going to a language center to learn English. But if everyone is doing it, why not put it in the curriculum in the first place? That way the students' families can save a lot of money and there won't be as large as a gap as is right now. So yeah, it's real bizarre. But welcome to Taiwan, what can I say, man? And the last thing is the research that are published in, if I recall correctly, 2021, where they talk about willingness to communicate. So willingness to communicate is an important factor to target language usage, where their competence will affect their willingness and anxiety to use the target language. So in our case, English basically is saying that how good you are in English directly translates to how willing you are to communicate with English, and how anxious you are to communicate with English. And with Taiwan, a lot of people, they are not willing to communicate with English, and or they are very anxious to use English to communicate because they are not competent. So let's move on to the next session, which is about AI. AI is a very double-edged sword. It can help with learning English, where there is a research that showed that learner-generated content, which is learners becomes the creators of their learning content and construct knowledge autonomously by interacting with or creating resources. For example, people, technology, and learning contents with self-defining goals in various environments. And AI can do a great job of helping you create those learner-generated contents and help you advance in your language skill. A very, very great example is Duolingo, where they openly stated that they use AI to help with creating content and creating the voices. Yeah, basically creating content and adjust its difficulty for people to help them learn a second language. Yeah, so basic language skill can be learned from using AI, but we need to learn how not to get dependent on AI. So for example, we can use Duolingo to learn English, but we must not rely on Duolingo to help us learn English. For example, how can we not get dependent of using AI to learn English? Basically, switch everything that you see into English. That's how I learn English. I think you can too. And another thing is, when everything that you look up doesn't have Chinese in them, you must learn things through English and understand English, just so you can get your research and your information. I think Taiwan has a very big problem of that because a lot of people will go and translate a lot of stuff for Taiwanese people. And in that way, yeah, sure, everyone can watch things using Chinese and have a better time understanding stuff. But at the same time, you can't learn English by using something that is readily available and is faster to get it, read it, watch it without someone going there and waiting for someone to do the work for you. I think, yeah, Taiwan people always suffer from that. Another thing about AI is people will get accustomed to AI's assistant, where they become less motivated to learn English. Why, you may ask? It's because they use AI to do English tasks because they don't know English. And because they don't need to use English, they will regress in English skill, devolve. You know what I'm saying? What I'm getting at? So the brain will shut down in English skill because of the reliance on AI, and then it poses a risk of regression just by not using your brain to process information. I asked my friends about what's the matter with Taiwan and English. They give me some answers that I think are quite interesting to share. My friend told me that the environment is a big problem in Taiwan, where it is a dilemma. Teachers who know English doesn't know how to teach their students, while those who know how to teach them doesn't know English. I think it's a weird dilemma to have. Just give them more training, but yeah, we still need to think about people that are not in the urban area, which my friend aunt, she came from the suburban, so yeah. And it has a problem of teachers doesn't have personality, which is another friend of mine has said that, which leads to a very boring classes. And students don't have the will to learn English because, well, the teachers' class are so boring that they can't even focus and listen to the teachers. Why and how can they learn English from them? And then I asked her about the critical period. She thinks that critical period is not the most important factor since it's only for mother tongue and second languages. English for Taiwanese people maybe are like their third languages. Indigenous language are their mother tongue, so they already need to learn Chinese as their second language. That is the main issue. Some Taiwanese people need to learn multiple languages at once, and they can't process that much information. So they can only choose one of them. For example, my friend whose family mainly speak Taiwanese, he can't speak English basically. And I think it stems from a problem where the school doesn't teach good English and he needs to learn Chinese at the same time as he learns English. Another point is phonics. Really enough, my friend said that the accents are fine, which to me it isn't. But anyways, an accent is an accent, and if you can communicate with someone, then I think the accent is fine, you know. Like I just use two ways to speak accents, you know. Whatever. And she said that 注音, which is the Taiwanese phonics system, will affect English pronunciation, which is fair because when we look at different accents from different countries, almost all of them have their cultural impacts from their mother tongue to the said languages. And she gave an example like apple instead of apple. Like, yeah, sure, I get it, because Taiwanese people, for whatever reasons, can't seem to have a good way to pronounce some words. We can look no further than the alphabet song where they will speak A, B, C, D, E, F, G because they don't have G in 注音, basically. And as a foreigner, you may think that it's so weird that they can't pronounce the words correctly. Actually, one of my professors has tell us that no, you need to teach the students the right way and even yourself the right way to speak the words, which, yeah, sure, is very important that we speak correctly. Otherwise, we look at a word that we don't understand or we glaze at the words very quickly. We need to pronounce it correctly. Point is, like, they don't know how to pronounce the word, which I think it may be a problem of Taiwanese people didn't teach how to pronounce. And I think, sure, IPAs can be very difficult, but how to separate a word into different syllables is fine. And I think it's easy enough to teach at school. I don't know why Taiwanese people don't teach it at school, but whatever. And she said that there's too much of a gap on individual in learning, where basically it comes back to the problem of urban areas versus rural areas and suburban people stuck in between. Where, yeah, sure, Taipei people can speak fluent, perfect English. Some, I might add, but some from the suburban area like Hualien. No, Hualien is kind of like rural area, so maybe like Taoyuan, they can't speak perfect English or good English, and this gap leads to more students are dragging down the grades, and we see the results of the junior high assessment exam is actually a curve, though it's not. and it just makes people look worse than they are actually. And when someone is way too good at something, you don't want to challenge them in the same area as a Asian kid because you can't get good grades in them. So you change to another subject and abandoning English. Yep. Basically, she said one may be very skilled and fluent, whereas another may be illiterate. Yeah, we basically have the same fault. So I asked them how severe is the problem, and my friend said that it's basically like a terminal patient where the resources is never enough and it makes worse people keep getting worse. And tech colleges don't teach the same thing as normal colleges. The skill set are different. To me, tech college doesn't really matter because they're learning the words that they need and the sentences they need in their respective occupation. Like for example, when someone go to a tech college learning about how to maintain and fix a car, be a car mechanic, they will learn all sorts of English, hopefully, about a car. Whereas a normal people don't even need to come in contact with that if they aren't really into cars and want to learn about different aspects of car and the parts, the history, whatever. Yeah. The resources is very scarce in Taiwan, which is very true, that there are a lot of language centers opening and the quality is bad and they are not very good at teaching you day-to-day English. They are very skilled at teaching you how to pass an exam, which to me is whatever. If you get good grades in exam doesn't mean that you are very capable of communicating in English very fluently. And another friend said is a 6 out of 10 for pronunciation and an 8 out of 10 for the skill gap in learning. So her personal experience she go to a learning center where the ranges are very wide. Like the ranges are from primary school to junior high, but the pronunciations are very bad in all of them. And she points out that in Zhixue Primary School, which is a primary school near Donghua, the kids almost can't speak basic English well until 4th to 6th grade, which I have personal experience of that. They're very, very unskilled in English. And when we're designing classes for them, we're talking about like kindergarten's level of English they are in more developed countries in English. And the learning gap is super wide in Taiwan, where someone can get maybe a 7 in IELTS, whereas other people didn't even dare to try IELTS because they may get a 2.5 with a 3 in IELTS. I'm like, huh? You can't. So basically how IELTS works is if you're good at speaking English, you'll get a pass, basically 4 or 5. And 3 is like you're basically illiterate. You might just as well call yourself illiterate at that point. I don't know why that guy on the internet is pushing himself to go for IELTS, but whatever. Anyways, it's their money, they got to waste it. It's not my money, so whatever. So how can we solve the problems? My friend said that first we need to strengthen the teacher's skill, where we train them to have the skill to both teach and be fluent in English. I mean, that's very basic requirement to be a good teacher that Taiwan is, for whatever reasons, lacking in that department. I don't know why, but yeah, they really lack in that department. We need to strengthen the willingness for the students to learn English too, because if students don't want to learn, no matter how good the teacher is, as a student they still can't learn anything about English or actually any other subjects, you know. is a huge issue that I think students currently are now facing. They are not interested in learning some subjects because the internet is such a good place and have the resources to learn English or other subjects. Yeah. And the second point is we need to change the environment. We need to use more English to communicate with foreigners. So we need to build an environment where foreigners can speak with English and not Chinese. We're kind of getting there in Donghua, the campus, where a lot of international students are starting to speak purely English to communicate with Taiwanese people, and Taiwanese people are using English to communicate back. And not like the old days where a lot of foreigners, they need to speak perfect Chinese. Like a lot of foreigners here in Donghua, they speak perfect Chinese but chooses to use English as their main communicating languages because they're more comfortable using it. And it's good that we're not forcing them to use Chinese, basically, but we still got a long ways to go, you know? Even in a campus setting that we're not fully capable of letting the foreigners use English purely to communicate, then I don't think that in a rural area or a suburban area, we can see a day where foreigners can use English and tourists can use English to communicate with peoples in Taiwan, not only the tour guides but strangers as well. There's their point. Now it comes to my own implication and my treatment on how to solve the problems at hand. The first way that I can think of, and the most easiest and important way of it, is we learn English earlier. Just start learning English early, because learning English early, it has more time for the students to develop the skills that they need to communicate with other people. Once they have the concrete skills developed, the basic skill developed, they are more willing to use English to communicate with other people. And that's a good thing, yeah. And an easy thing to do, just change the curriculum. The second point is, I think we need to change the way to learn English. We need to change how English is taught and how students are learning English in order for them to be interested in English and have more of an impact on speaking and letting them know how to communicate when it comes to a completely random scenario. Like back to the story that I talked about in the start of this podcast, where a foreigner came to ask directions. And obviously, we hope that Taiwanese people can use English to talk back to them in a fluent and clear way so that the tourists won't get lost. Another point is we need to practice more in every aspect of English, especially speaking and listening. So here's the main problem. Taiwanese people are not that bad in English actually. They are very well versed in writing and especially reading, but they can't speak fluent English or listen to a weird accent that someone is speaking. For example, when I first came here, I have a very hard time understanding a black man from the Caribbean speaking English, but he's nice that he repeats like 3 times for me to understand what he's actually saying. I think that if Taiwanese people can have more practice in every aspect of English, especially speaking and listening, they have a easier time to learn English more and develop more skills for them to communicate with people. And they can read more resources and articles and researches from foreign publishers and professors to aid them in their academics or their career. And the last treatment that I can think of is build a bilingual environment. Like we can build a bilingual environment so that people coming from all over the world can speak in English, and Taiwanese people can have a easier time because there are already so many people out there using English. They can have a good real world practice and use English. They won't regress, they won't rust on their skill, and they can have a very good results just by people forcing them to use English. You know what I'm saying? So it's a good way to treat this problem. But specifically, how does these treatments and pills work in Taiwan, this society, these patients? First off, to make learning English earlier, a good way is that we just make English a required course in first grade or even kindergartens. The parents are already pushing their kids to learning centers and language centers in first grade or kindergartens. They hire people to teach them English at that point. Why don't just make it a required course so that everyone starts on the same pages? It's an easy way to solve these problems, and I think a lot of parents will agree on that. Secondly, on how we can change the way to learn English, how this pill work is, we focus less on remembering words. We need to transition into sentence structure, communication, and writing, especially business and formal writing. Because when we think about using English, it basically boils down to business and formal writing when we're moving into an international city or when we're working in an international company. We need to make the expats know what we're saying, and we need to make the people at other parts of the world know what we're getting at and what we're trying to communicate with them. So I think the school must focus on business and formal writing in order for a lot of students develop some useful skills in their school life to help them and aid them later on in their career path. As for practice in every aspect of English, especially speaking and listening, the mechanism works by worksheets, in-class exercises, full English teaching, online resources, etc. So if we want to practice more, why not just use more work? Actually, if we put in more work, we'll get better at something. And I think worksheet and exercises are a good way for the students to learn and reinforce their English skill. So it's hard work to say the least, but it's easy enough for them if they really want to try to learn English. I think full English teaching can force them to listen to English, so they must practice in class. And the online resources can help them reinforce their memories and develop skills that are not necessarily going to be taught in class. So practice English more every day. And as for building a bilingual environment, I think the Hill's mechanism is it will simulate real-life scenario where students can learn how to use English in life. Basically, just like the story that we told, we make our students to be inside a scenario where they need to get something or get out of something using English. I think it's a real enough scenario that we'll all encounter it at some point in life. So I think it's easy enough and it will not bother the teachers and the students too much I think the students will have fun doing the activities if the teacher is capable enough. But just like when we go to the doctors and the doctor tell us that this treatment will help us solve all of our problems, it still is a hard pill to swallow. So, how feasible is the pill or the treatment or the solution on how to solve this problem? And I think the first problem is parents and the students' pressure from the Ministry of Education's decision to let students learn English early. Yeah, about that. For whatever reasons, Taiwanese parents think that students have too much stress on them, and or the students think that they have too much stress on them. I don't know, man. I think Taiwanese student doesn't have enough pressure on them. Like seriously, your test is piece easy. You have nothing to do outside of school, and you don't even need to go to like 10 different learning centers just to learn your stuff for your exam. Taiwanese exam is easy enough for you to just study at school and do nothing and have time for extracurriculum activity. I don't think you're stressed enough, man. And for the parents, why not you stop putting them to a lot of language center, learning center, whilst they are learning 3 instruments at the same time and trying to learn 5 different languages at once. Your kids are not stressed out because of the school pushing more weight on your kids. It's you pushing too much weight on your kids. How about you learn better parenting method instead of complaining to the government about they push your kids too hard so that they are very stressed out and burned out? I don't think that's the way, man. Yeah, it's a very hard pill to swallow, especially for me. I don't know why, but Taiwanese people are super lazy. Like seriously. And the second point is the school doesn't have enough resources putting pressure on teachers. Yet that's the hard pill to swallow, you know. Because not only rural areas but also suburban areas, the school doesn't have enough resources already right now. And they need to have a lot of resources put in just to let the school be competitive to urban areas, public school and private school. Even though we're very well might be widening the gap between urban kids and suburban and rural kids, we still need to do it. It's already too late to push it now if we want to make Taiwan a bilingual country by 2030. And we need to do it as soon as possible. The teachers may be stressed out because they don't have enough resources or they don't have enough skills, so the government can actually get some subsidies to rural areas or even all schools for teachers to be more skilled in learning how to teach students English. If we really wanted to be a bilingual country by 2030, I think it's already too late to do it now. We need to do it ASAP. So yeah, basically, sorry teachers, we might need to put more stress on you. Or maybe we just hire some new teachers, you know. College kids now are more versed in English. You're more skilled in English than the old teachers. So we can let them be our next generation's teacher. And another hard pill to swallow is not every student can accept the added pressure. To that I say, kids, you're not working hard enough. You need to work hard enough in order to thrive in this society. If you are not good in English, you can't even go to different countries to see the world. Especially America, like North America and Europe. They all speak English, and even if you go to some weird countries, they still speak English, like South Africa. If you want to leave Taiwan as a lot of the kids today might say, then you need to be good at English. They're stressed out because, to me seriously, I think that it's only because they haven't experienced how stressed out someone can actually be before they are burned out and have depression. They are not good at coping or dealing with pressure. And I think the school or the government can have some courses, or they can have more resources to let the students deal with the pressure. But actually, yeah, you need to learn how to deal with a lot of pressure, man. That's the real life. You're living in a society where all the pressure is on you, so learn to deal with it early, man. And the last point is, remote area have less resources. The disparity may become larger. Yeah, obviously, the remote areas have basically no resources. So we need to give them more resources. The government must do something about it. The NGO are already doing a lot of stuff about it. So why aren't we help them kids to learn the way to learn English properly, or we help those kids to move into a better place to learn? I think it's a society problem and cultural problem. For example, if you are living in a indigenous village, yeah, there really aren't a lot of stuff that the government can help them to learn. That's why we multiply the indigenous kids point by 1.35. Isn't that it? Yeah. So although progresses are being made, I think we still need more resources, especially when we want to push English, which is a third language for them and a lot of kids. So after the diagnosis and the treatment, is there anything good that we can talk about it? Is there a glimmer of hope? To me, I think there is a glimmer of hope. Like we just talked about it, the Bilingual 2030 plan, which is a plan that the Taiwan government made, which aimed to improve Taiwan's English capability. And when I look into the document, it's just doing what other countries are already doing like 20 years ago. Like for example, moving from 9 years free education to 12 years, or let them kids learn English more and make it mandatory in 3rd grade and push more credits, which is 40. I must emphasize that 40 credits for the kids to help them learn English and become a fluent English speaker, which seriously is not enough. We need to put in a lot more work into that. And I don't know what the government is thinking right now. Maybe they're just thinking of the vote. They're thinking of the politics. They didn't think of the new generation, the next generation, where they don't have the power to vote yet, but that's besides the point, right? It's not about Taiwan and English, even though that you can't leave politics, politics can't leave you. But that's besides the scope of today's episode. So yeah, let's not talk about it. And yeah, it's a good direction to move on to, but I don't think that it is a hard enough push for Taiwan to become a bilingual country in 2030. And another point is international students makes Taiwanese students more willing to communicate with English. With more and more sisters country and more international students coming to Taiwan to study for free, I might add, for free, Why are we paying so much? Why are we paying so much to study here? Yeah, I digress. And going here to study, a lot of them are not very good at English, especially when they are coming from a country where English is not their first language. For example, Mongolia, Belize, Puerto Rico, you know, those kind of countries, and the Caribbeans, their first language is not English. So, yeah, they can use English to communicate well. And that's why they are here after all. They can communicate. But Taiwanese students forces to use English to communicate with them, which to me, as I said, is a good thing. Yeah, I don't see the point of forcing them to learn Chinese to communicate, but they still need to learn Chinese at a very basic level. Yeah, so changes are actually being made. And with all these international students, whether the students are willing or not, they still need to communicate in English. So it helps them train their English skill and make them more fluent in English. And as I just said, changes are being made. More parents are putting them kids to the language center to learn English because the school doesn't teach them enough. And the school are already pushing harder to let the students learn English because they need to become the best school in their county. And English is somehow one of the subjects. I'm not saying that exam-orientated study is good, and those kind of teaching usually didn't lead to some good results, but it still progresses, right? Progress is progress, and we take those. So it's good enough that I think there is a glimmer of hope, but I think the light at the end of the tunnel may very well might just be a smartphone flashlight, you know? It's not bright, but we can see the light. And I think that wraps up for today's episode of Bedside Manner. Hope you enjoy my diagnosis and treatment. Goodbye. Have a good night.